You're disappearing. Not all at once. Not in a way anyone can see. But piece by piece, day by day, you're becoming less yourself. And there's one thing causing it. One behavior you repeat without thinking. Al-Ghazali saw this pattern 800 years ago. The thing that makes people lose themselves while thinking they're fine. Here's what to stop doing right now. The behavior is this. Stop living for other people's approval. Stop making every decision based on what they'll think. Stop editing yourself to fit their expectations. Stop performing a version of yourself that you think will be accepted. Because every time you do this, you lose a piece of who you actually are. And over time, those pieces add up. Until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person looking back. Not because you've changed, but because you've disappeared. This is what Al-Ghazali called the quiet death. The death that happens while you're still alive. Where your body keeps functioning, but your actual self slowly fades. And the worst part is that it feels like the right thing to do. It feels like maturity. Like being considerate. Like not being selfish. Society rewards you for it. People praise you for being easy to work with. For not causing problems. For fitting in. But what they're really praising is your willingness to erase yourself for their comfort. And that's not something to be proud of. That's something to be terrified of. Here's how it starts. Small compromises. You don't say what you really think because you don't want to upset anyone. You agree to things you don't want to do because you don't want to disappoint people. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You pretend to like things you don't like. You hide parts of yourself that you think won't be acceptable. And each time you do this, you tell yourself it's no big deal. It's just easier this way. It's just being polite. It's just keeping the peace. But these small compromises aren't small. They're training. You're training yourself to be someone you're not. And the more you practice being that person, the better you get at it. Until eventually, you're so good at performing that you forget you're performing. Al-Ghazali saw this everywhere. People who spent their entire lives trying to be what others wanted them to be. And by the end, they had no idea who they actually were. Because they'd spent so long being someone else that they'd lost touch with themselves. They could tell you what everyone expected of them. They could perform any role required. But if you asked them what they actually wanted, what they actually felt, what they actually believed, they couldn't answer. Not because they didn't want to, but because they genuinely didn't know anymore. And here's what makes this so dangerous. It's not like you wake up one day and suddenly realize you've lost yourself. It's gradual, invisible. You keep functioning, keep working, keep maintaining relationships, keep checking all the boxes. But something inside you feels wrong. You feel empty, disconnected, like you're watching your life instead of living it. Like you're going through motions instead of making choices. And you can't figure out why. Because on paper, everything looks fine. You're doing what you're supposed to do. You're being who you're supposed to be. But that's exactly the problem. You're being who you're supposed to be, not who you actually are. So how do you stop this? How do you prevent yourself from disappearing? Al-Ghazali said it starts with noticing. Noticing when you're about to compromise yourself. When you're about to say yes when you mean no. When you're about to perform instead of being real. When you're about to edit yourself to fit someone else's expectations. And in that moment, before you do it, you pause. You ask yourself one question. Is this who I actually am? Or is this who I think I need to be? This question is uncomfortable. Because sometimes the answer is, I don't know anymore. Sometimes you've been performing for so long that you can't tell the difference between your real self and your performed self. But that discomfort is important. That confusion is information. It's telling you that you've already started losing yourself. And the only way to find yourself again is to stop performing, even for a moment, even in a small way. You stop saying what people want to hear and start saying what's actually true. You stop agreeing to things you don't want and start setting boundaries. You stop hiding parts of yourself and start letting people see you as you actually are. And here's what happens when you do this. Some people won't like it. Some will be confused. Some will be disappointed because they got used to the performed version of you, the version that never causes problems, never disagrees, never has needs. And now you're disrupting that. You're no longer fitting perfectly into their expectations. And that makes them uncomfortable. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself, to the person who's been disappearing while you've been busy pleasing everyone else. Al-Ghazali would tell you that losing people's approval is not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing is losing yourself, because you can recover from disappointing others. You can rebuild relationships. You can earn respect in new ways. But if you lose yourself completely, if you perform for so long that there's nothing real left, that's a loss you might never recover from. Because you can't go back to being someone you never allowed yourself to be in the first place. But let's be clear about what this doesn't mean. This doesn't mean being rude. This doesn't mean being selfish. This doesn't mean ignoring other people's feelings or needs. It means honoring your own feelings and needs with the same respect you give to everyone else's. It means understanding that being considerate doesn't require self-erasure. It means learning that you can care about people without disappearing for them. You can be kind without being a doormat. You can be thoughtful without being invisible. The key is learning to tell the difference between healthy compromise and self-betrayal. Healthy compromise is when you adjust your preferences for the sake of harmony, but you don't violate your values. You don't pretend to be someone you're not. You don't agree to things that make you feel wrong inside. Self-betrayal is when you ignore your own truth to avoid conflict. When you say yes when everything in you is screaming no. When you perform happiness when you're actually miserable. When you hide your real thoughts and feelings because you're afraid of how people will react. And here's how to tell which one you're doing. After a healthy compromise, you feel okay. Maybe not thrilled, but okay. You don't feel resentful. You don't feel like you betrayed yourself. But after self-betrayal, you feel wrong. You feel a tightness in your chest. You feel angry at yourself. You feel like you just gave away something important. That feeling is your signal. That's yourself telling you that you just compromised something that shouldn't be compromised. And the more you ignore that signal, the quieter it gets, until eventually it stops speaking altogether. And that's when you're in real danger, because now you've lost your internal compass. You can't tell what's right for you anymore because you've been overriding it for so long. This is why Al-Ghazali called this a warning, not advice, not a suggestion, a warning. Because this pattern doesn't just make you unhappy. It erases you. It turns you into a shell, a performance, a collection of reactions to other people's expectations with no center, no core, no real self underneath. And people live like this for decades, entire lives, never knowing what it feels like to be themselves because they never gave themselves permission to exist as themselves. But you can stop this today, right now. You can decide that you're done disappearing, that you're done performing, that you're done editing yourself to fit into spaces that were never made for you. And you can start existing as you actually are. Not perfectly, not without fear, but authentically. And yes, this will be uncomfortable. Yes, this will upset some people. Yes, this will change relationships. But it will also save you from the quiet death, from the slow disappearance, from waking up one day decades from now and realizing you never actually lived as yourself thought. So here's what to do. Start small. Pick one situation where you usually perform, where you usually say what people want to hear or act how people want you to act. And in that situation, this week, be real. Say what you actually think. Express what you actually feel. Be who you actually are. Not aggressively. Not dramatically. Just honestly. And notice what happens. Notice the discomfort. Notice the urge to retreat back into performance. Notice the fear that people won't like the real you. But also notice something else. Notice that you feel more alive, more present, more like yourself. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's scary, it's real. And real is what you've been missing. And then do it again, in another situation, with another person. Little by little, reclaim yourself. Piece by piece, stop disappearing. Not because it's easy, but because the alternative is unbearable. The alternative is living your entire life as someone you're not. The alternative is reaching the end and realizing you were here, but you were never really here. You were too busy being who everyone else needed you to be to ever discover who you actually were. Al-Ghazali saw people reach that point. People at the end of their lives who finally admitted the truth. That they'd spent decades performing. That they'd never let anyone see their real self. That they'd disappeared so completely they didn't even know what was left. And the regret in that realization was crushing. Not because they failed at something, but because they never tried to be themselves. They never gave themselves permission to exist. And now it was too late. The time was gone. The life was lived. As someone else, don't let that be you. Don't wait until the end to realize you disappeared. Stop performing now. Stop seeking approval now. Stop editing yourself now. Before there's nothing left to save. Before the performance becomes permanent. Before you forget that there was ever a real you underneath all the pretending. You're still here. Pieces of you are still here. You can still be found. You can still come back. But you have to stop doing the thing that's making you disappear. You have to stop living for everyone else's approval. You have to start choosing yourself. Even when it's hard. Even when it costs you. Even when people don't understand. Because losing their approval is temporary. But losing yourself is permanent. And no amount of acceptance from others is worth that price.